ABC News Special Report.
I'm Wade Johnson in New York, and we're coming on the air with breaking news. Major developments concerning the classified documents case involving President Biden. Special counsel Robert Hur releasing his 345-page report on the investigation into those documents found at a number of properties linked to President Biden. The report highly critical of his handling of the materials, but saying, quote here, "We conclude that no criminal charges are warranted in this matter. We would conclude the same, even if there is no policy against charging a sitting president. Our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified information after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen." Now, some of those documents were found at an old office, others found at the president's home in Delaware, including his garage. The materials dating back to his time in the Senate and as vice president. The White House has already seen this report, we're told, and President Biden will not ask for any redactions. But the Justice Department may redact some parts considered classified information. Let's get right to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, as we're dissecting all of this. But, Pierre, that key headline, no charges recommended.
Indeed, with the 345-page report lays out chapter and verse in terms of how President Biden and aides mishandled classified documents in the years before he became president. Some of the mistakes are described as egregious, but ultimately special counsel Robert Hur concluded that these were not prosecutable offenses. Hur takes great pains to lay out his reasoning. He also takes time to spell out how President Biden's case is different from that of former President Trump, who's being prosecuted by a different special counsel for allegedly mishandling classified documents. He says, quote, "Most notably, after being given multiple chances to return classified documents and avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump did the opposite." Hur goes on to say that Trump allegedly enlisted others to destroy evidence and lie about it. He points out that President Biden returned classified documents to the National Archives and to the FBI. And what DOJ officials are emphasizing is that Hur was once a U.S. attorney appointed by former President Trump and that he had complete independence in this investigation. Here's some more specifics. As you said earlier, he writes, "We conclude that no criminal charges are warranted in this matter. We would reach the same conclusion even if Department of Justice policy did not foreclose criminal charges against the sitting president." But some of what they found is damning, including evidence that Biden willfully retained classified materials after he left the vice president's office, and that some of those materials were classified, including information about military and foreign policy. There was also information about covert U.S. sources. Agents recovered the documents, as you said, in a garage, office, and even a basement. But Hur concludes that there was not enough evidence to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt with.
All right, Pierre Thomas for us, thank you so much. Let's bring in our Chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, who's here. We're getting this report. You're reading through it. Of course, John, all of this playing out as former President Donald Trump is scheduled to go to trial for a case of allegedly mishandling classified documents. But what are the key differences in these cases?
Well, there are key differences, but first, Whit, I've been reading through this report, and there are some significant findings here getting to what Biden did, why he retained these documents. And he retained them essentially to write two different books and to document his legacy. This is from the report. He used these materials to write memoirs published in 2007 and 2017 to document his legacy and to cite as evidence that he was a man of presidential timber. What were the documents? Well, some of them had to do with Afghanistan policy. Then Vice President Biden very much opposed a move that Barack Obama, the president, did in 2009 to surge additional troops into Afghanistan. So one of these documents included notes of a classified memo that Biden had written to Obama saying why he opposed it. So it gives you a little bit of a sense of what these documents are and why he had them. But here's a couple of very important distinctions. One, as soon as Biden was asked to return classified documents, he did. There's no obstruction of justice here. Just a reminder of what happened with President Trump. He retained boxes and boxes of classified information. He was asked by the National Archives to return official government records. He returned some. They found out those included classified documents. He was asked if he had any more. He returned about 38 more pages several months later. And then his lawyer certified that he had no more classified documents in his possession. Well, that was in May of 2022. August of that year, what happened? The FBI had reason to believe he had a lot more classified documents. They got a search warrant. They searched Mar-a-Lago, and they found that Donald Trump had over several boxes, 100 different classified documents that he had not turned over, that he had allegedly directed his personnel to lie about those documents, that he had directed an employee of his to destroy surveillance tape of surveillance cameras showing where the documents were kept. So there's a whole series of differences here, but there are this is going to muddy the waters, and it's going to make it easy for Donald Trump to say, look, he had classified documents and he wasn't prosecuted. I had them and they prosecuted me. It's
Former
unequal.
Vice President Mike Pence had documents.
Yes. And by the way, there's another very important point, again, going through this, that at least some of these documents were classified at the very highest level of classification, top secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information, TS, SCI. That is the most sensitive, among the most sensitive secrets the U.S. government has, and at least some of the documents had markings up to that level that Biden had stored in his garage in Delaware.
And this also raises questions about sources and methods, too.
Yes,
and I know we're still looking into it, but...
Yes. And you know, it's important to say that the decision was made here not to prosecute, the special counsel in this case, special counsel Hur, said that part of it is, you know, he lays out the differences between what Biden did and what Trump did, but there's the context here, and I want to read another line here. In addition, Mr. Biden's memory was significantly limited, both during his recorded interviews with his ghostwriter in 2017 and in his interview with our office in 2023. And his cooperation with our investigation included by reporting to the government that the Afghan documents were in his Delaware garage will largely convince some jurors that he had made an innocent mistake rather than acting willfully, that is, with intent to break the law, as the statute requires. So again, to be prosecuted, the prosecutor has to make the case that he willfully had the documents and that he intended to break the law by misrepresenting what he had. So it's interesting here, part of the reason that they're making, this is on page 5 of this report, and it you know, makes the case that part of this is they'll say that his memory was simply faulty on this question.
We'll likely see some people seize on that moment on the campaign trail. We'll get more back into that in a little bit, John. Thank you. But I do want to go to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, who's digging into all of this. And Mary, the key thing that we've heard from the Biden team repeatedly over and over again was that he cooperated with this investigation from the beginning, and he gave those documents back. What's the reaction you're hearing now?
Yeah, well, so far, no official reaction from the White House. You might actually hear the sound of a helicopter behind me. The president is about to depart the White House. We will see if he answers any questions out there on the South Lawn. But yes, to your point, the president and this White House have repeatedly stressed throughout all of this that they have cooperated with authorities, that they have been transparent through all of this. The president stressing that he takes classified documents very seriously. But of course, now the president, bottom line, has a lot of explaining to do, because he said repeatedly in last January, when all of this came to light, that he was surprised to learn that there were any government records at his private office here in Washington or at his private home, and that he didn't know what was in these documents. You'll recall the president at the time said flatly, you're going to find that there's nothing there. He said he had no regrets and that there is no there. Well, obviously, this report is raising some serious questions and concerns about what the president did know and what he did take. You know, finding that he willfully retained and disclosed classified information, though, of course, the report finds that they can't prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And just to underscore that point, I want to call your attention to something on page 3 of the report here, referencing how the president was writing these books, these memoirs, with the help of a ghostwriter. And it calls out this instance. It says, in a recorded conversation with one of those ghostwriters in February of 2017, about a month after he left office, Biden said, while referencing a 2009 memo, that he had just found all the classified stuff downstairs. The question is, that's a pretty, concerning and damning recollection there. The question is going to be, did the president remember any of this? How is he going to explain this, given that they have stressed over and over again that the president did nothing wrong, that he didn't recall taking any classified documents.
Mary, thank you. John Carl, I know you've been digging into that exact point as well.
Yes, and keep in mind, what Hur is saying is that he decided not, or he's recommending not to prosecute because he doesn't think he can get a conviction at trial.
Saying they have some evidence, but not enough evidence.
Yes, exactly, and that the context would make it hard to prosecute. But listen to this sentence. Okay, this is on page 6 of this report. We have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Based on our direct interactions with and observations of him, he is someone who many jurors will want to identify reasonable doubt. I mean, this is the special counsel saying that Biden presented himself to them, and I want to repeat these words. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview with him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory.
I mean, I can hear the Trump team right now. I mean, putting T-shirts and slogans together for this exact reason, making the case that he is treated differently than President Biden is when it comes to these classified documents.
Well, this is making a case and justifying a decision not to prosecute, but it's hardly the image that President Biden going into a re-election campaign wants out there.
John, thank you. Let's go to Rick Klein, our political director, with more on this, because obviously this is all playing out in this critical and historic election year. Both campaigns, I mean, we technically haven't determined who the nominee is going to be on the Republican side, or the Democratic side for that matter, officially. But we're going to hear both campaigns talking about this report from the special counsel.
Yeah, and look, if the question of the differing circumstances, the Biden team likes their odds. They're pointing out to me that President Trump is now under series of different federal charges, including a series of charges related to his handling of classified documents. And there's nothing in this report that suggests that his handling of the material was anything like Trump or his alleged efforts to try to obstruct efforts to get those documents back. On the other hand, this identifies some glaring political vulnerabilities. This is a very damaging political report. And you can imagine that same case that the special prosecutor here is talking about potentially being made to a jury about him as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. It's not just that they could put that on a T-shirt or put it on a campaign bumper. That is the essence of the main case against Joe Biden right now from some Democrats and from many, many Republicans and independents who have worries about his leaderships. And the fact that that now exists in the black and white of a formal report from the Justice Department, from a special counsel, is extremely politically damaging at a very difficult time for a president who's trying to make the case that, yes, not only is he the right choice, but that he is capable and that he is confident about going into this re-election matchup. There is a lot here to chew on that is well beyond the legalities that, again, the Biden team has a good answer for that. They will not have as good an answer for this.
All right, Rick, thank you so much. Let's bring in our legal analyst, ABC News legal analyst, Kate Shaw, on this, because, Kate, John and I were talking a little bit here. In some ways, it reminds us of James Comey, the report against Hillary Clinton and the private email server back in 2016. Do you see some parallels here where the special counsel is essentially saying, look, mistakes were made, but not enough for charges?
There are absolutely echoes of that episode, right? So typically, if DOJ decides not to bring charges, it just doesn't bring charges. It doesn't make a public release of a lengthy report explaining the decision not to bring charges and any potential misconduct by the individual who is being investigated. And so this is atypical. Of course, this is a sitting president, and it does seem as though at every step of the investigation, the president and his team were very forthcoming. So you and John were just talking about the political fallout potentially of the depiction of Biden as, having a failing memory or an elderly man. Of course, that flows directly from his decision to sit for interviews and to cooperate with the investigation, and indeed not to raise any executive privilege objections to the report and to its public release. But the non-prosecution decision is the big news. There was not sufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was any willful retention or dissemination, even if there might have been some evidence to that effect. So to my mind, as a legal matter, that's the really important takeaway. But of course, there's enough in this report to make political hay of that I expect that the political takeaway may be as important as the legal takeaway.
And Kate, forgive me for coming back to this, but this is going to be the source of a lot of conversation in the weeks to come. This line here is a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Is that a reason not to prosecute or file charges? And why, if not, why would that be written in this report?
You know, I think that the assessment was of the entire course of conduct. So you had these documents that were found, obviously, in Biden's possession. So the question was, how and why did they get there? And look, Biden was the vice president for 8 years. When you leave the White House, you take a lot of things with you. Many of these documents at issue were his handwritten notebooks that had contents that were deemed classified. But I guess if there were a lot of questions about why and when and what documents were taken, and maybe there was difficulty on Biden's part recalling some of the specifics, I don't think that's crazy, and I don't think it's legally irrelevant to the question of intent, which is critical to any charging decision.
Kate Shaw for us, thank you. Let's bring in Terry Moran, our senior national correspondent, who's actually at the Supreme Court today covering our other big story of the day. But Terry, want to get your take on this report?
Well, it is a bad day for Joe Biden. It was a good day for Donald Trump here in the Supreme Court, and a bad day for Joe Biden. And this report, it seems, will deepen and confirm what polls show is one of the major problems in the country right now, which is a pervasive and corrosive cynicism that has taken hold of the public mind, that the game is rigged, that they always get away with it. The insiders get special treatment. And that has not just eroded confidence and trust in leaders, and that is a problem for Joe Biden politically, but in institutions like this court. People increasingly, polls show, don't trust the court to do the right thing. That right across the board is one of the reasons that the politics of this country are so dysfunctional. To have conversation, to have democratic self-governance, there has to be a level of confidence and trust. And this report, which shows that Joe Biden, did what they all do, a lot of people will say, I think will just deepen the cynicism that already has taken hold of the country.
Terry Moran for us, thank you. Pierre Thomas, if we could go back to you, again, as we're going through this report and looking at some of these explanations, another part that I know that we're going to be hearing about is this line about the willful retention of documents. Are you getting any further explanation about that and why the special counsel said that they found some evidence, but not enough to charge or recommend charges?
Right. When you pour into the report, and again, as everyone else has emphasized, there's a difference between the politics of the matter and the legal facts of the matter. One of the things that the special counsel points out as a weakness in the case that he was attempting to build, if you will, is that some of the documents might have been in Biden's home without him knowing that they were there. In other words, they might have been sent inadvertently by others. There's notes that the special counsel concludes contained classified information, but he talks about Biden making the case that he's allowed to take notes about certain things that he did while in office, and that all of his predecessors, including vice presidents and other presidents, had done the same thing. So again, that gets at the intent issue. So at the end of the day, what this comes down to over and over again is that they found some damning evidence, but not enough that they felt that they could go to a jury and get a conviction.
Pierre, thank you. John Carl, we were just talking here, too, as you're going through more of the pages, because we're also getting an understanding of how Biden responded to these interview questions from the special counsel.
Yeah, he sat down for extensive interviews with special counsel Hur on this. And what's interesting, on the question of his notebooks, he insisted that he believed that these were his property. I want to read you exactly what is in this report on this. We expect Mr. Biden's defense at trial would be that he thought the notebooks were his personal property, that he was allowed to take them home even if they contained classified information. During our interview of him, Mr. Biden was emphatic, declaring his notebooks were, quote, my property, and that, quote, every president before me has done the exact same thing. That is, kept handwritten classified materials after leaving office.
You said every president before me.
Yes.
He wasn't president at the time.
Well, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. But he's also, you get a sense that he got irritated with this line of questioning. This is my property. These are my notebooks. I had every right to take them. Now, look, we saw in a case against David Petraeus years ago, classified notes are classified. You can't, just because you put it in your handwriting, and it still must be kept in the exact same way other classified material is kept. But Biden, according to the special counsel, pointed to the example of Ronald Reagan, who famously kept his daily diary every day while he was in the White House. And that some of those diaries contained classified information, and there was no effort to prosecute Reagan or anybody around Reagan for the fact that some of those diaries actually had material that was classified. And Hur concedes that at trial that would be pretty compelling. And again, it gets to his state of mind. Was he intentionally keeping stuff that he knew that he had to send back? Well, Hur says he should have known that classified notes must be kept classified, but gets to his state of mind. He clearly, at least Hur believes, and a compelling case can be made that he knew, that he believed he had the right to have this material.
Because they were his property.
They were well, in his view, they were his property, and again, falling back on that, faulty memory, elderly man defense as well, that he just honestly didn't know or had reason to believe that he was okay to keep that material even though it was classified.
And again, the comparisons to the Trump case, though, he had said as well, these are mine, my documents. We heard him say it. Obviously, the context was different, and what was happening as Biden was cooperating with investigators, but still some of these quotes are similar.
But let's not forget the most important distinction here, which is as soon as this investigation commences, which happened as a result of the Trump investigation, there was a look to see who else had classified information. Biden went through, conducted this search, turned everything over, turned it over voluntarily, submitted to the sworn interview with the special counsel. This is not the way Donald Trump acted. He kept the stuff back. Even when subpoenaed, he made efforts to try to hide the stuff at Mar-a-Lago, allegedly, and he allegedly told his own staff to lie about the documents.
Very
different than what happened.
Absolutely, yes.
But
and that context is truly important.
In the legal context.
Yes.
But again, the point that Rick made, the point that Terry made, politically, this very much creates problems for Biden because it allows Trump to muddy the waters on this.
Let's go back to Mary Bruce at the White House. Mary, you're learning more.
Yeah, Whit, in fact, we just got a statement from the president's legal team. We are still making our way through this, so bear with me here. But it says they're pleased that the investigation has concluded and that the special counsel found no criminal charges are warranted in this matter. Even if the president were out of office and a private citizen, they underscore and stress the fact that the president self-reported the classified documents that were found, that they cooperated fully with this investigation, that there was no obstruction, that the president has cooperated throughout all of this. They say, quote, the simple truth is President Biden takes classified information seriously and strives to protect it. And they go on to note that they disagree with a number of, and I quote here, inaccurate and inappropriate comments in the special counsel's report. Nonetheless, the most important decision that the special counsel made, that no charges are warranted, is firmly based on the facts and evidence. And I believe what they are referencing there is those comments that we have been discussing that are in this report about the president's memory and his age. And it is notable that actually within this report, Whit, it quotes from a February 5th letter that was sent from the president's legal team to the special counsel's team, where they say, and again, I'm quoting here, this is in the report, quoting this letter that the president's team sent, saying they do not believe that the report's treatment of President Biden's memory is accurate or appropriate. They say the report uses highly prejudicial language to describe a commonplace occurrence among witnesses, a lack of recall of years-old events. So again, I think what you are going to see in the coming days and weeks here, and what we will likely hear from the president at some point, is that this report did not find any criminal charges. They will, I'm sure, stress the differences between this case and their cooperation with authorities here versus how Donald Trump handled his handling of classified documents, which, of course, did lead to criminal indictment and federal charges. And they are certainly going to take issue with their characterization of the president's age and memory, which may be the most politically consequential point of this report as he is heading into a very difficult re-election campaign.
Yeah, very true, Mary Bruce. Thank you. I want to go back to Pierre Thomas here, because, Pierre, I know you're learning a few more things, but as we do, I just want to note again, remind our viewers that there are roughly 100 people, witnesses, who were interviewed as part of this investigation. That includes Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, even wait staff who were at the Biden property that was hosting an event. But Pierre, what else are you learning here as we dig into this report?
Well, as we look at the report, the politics, again, are damning for President Biden in many people's eyes. But in 30 years of covering the Justice Department, one thing that strikes me is what I heard from sources early on about President Trump, for example. They say the former president forced their hand. All the things that John Carl just talked about, how they gave him opportunity after opportunity to return the documents, that he dismissed a subpoena. He told other people, allegedly, not to cooperate. These are the reasons they said that he forced their hand. In this case, they're making the distinction, again, that Joe Biden, once confronted with the issue, cooperated, and that's how they typically handle these cases. That's the difference with.
Pierre Thomas, thank you so much. We appreciate it, and thanks to our entire team. I do believe we have some photos from the report as we conclude this special report here, if we could. There's a photograph specifically inside the garage of President Joe Biden's home. Do we have it? There it is. You can see some of the boxes stacked up there. There is, I believe, a treadmill in the shot, and of course John, the green Corvette that we've heard a lot about.
I mean, this is a very messy garage, a rocking chair, several boxes, presumably in this report because there are boxes that contain the classified information. The treadmill, his famous Corvette, tools in the background. This is a big problem because of politics image. And we know the images of Donald Trump and the boxes of documents that were stuffed at a bathroom in Mar-a-Lago or on the stage in the ballroom at Mar-a-Lago. And here you see boxes stuffed into a garage, willy-nilly, clearly not treated with the respect and the secure way you expect classified documents to be kept.
John, thank you. Terry Moran, your final thoughts there from the Supreme Court.
Well, I think what you've been saying, that this is a huge problem for President Biden and for the country. People are looking for leadership. They're looking for leadership that can get things done and that they can trust. And the combination of what the Supreme Court heard today, the case against Donald Trump in Colorado, based on what the Colorado Supreme Court found was his participation in an insurrection against this country. And now this report saying that President Biden willfully mishandled classified documents, and that the investigators reported the fact that they felt they were dealing with an elderly, well-meaning man who had trouble remembering things. That's a problem for both those men and for the country.